When you conjure an image of cowboy sustenance, what materializes before your mind's eye? Many of us envision a weary, dust-caked cowhand positioned beside a crackling campfire, a pot of beans bubbling lazily, and a tin cup of coffee clutched in weathered fingers. And while beans and coffee did indeed constitute essential pillars of their diet, a cowboy's daily nourishment was far from the monotonous gruel that popular imagination has settled upon, particularly for those fortunate enough to ride alongside a chuck wagon. The term chuck wagon originates from the American South, as documented by sources such as America Eats, whereas it was previously designated the mess wagon upon the Dakota prairies. The predominant cooking implement of choice was the Dutch oven. The cook wielded immense authority, compelling cowboys to actively curry favor with him in hopes of securing supplementary rations during the evening hours. This influence extended to such a degree that even the formidable trail boss frequently deferred to his judgment. The cook, occasionally referred to as Cookie, meticulously stocked the wagon with easily preservable essentials: beans, cured meats, coffee, lard, and potatoes. Given their primary responsibility of herding cattle, beef was readily accessible, supplemented by the cowboys' own hunting and foraging efforts along the journey. Remember to strike that like button. It fuels the fire and keeps these historical chronicles alive. Do not neglect to secure your subscription and hammer that notification bell, for the next chapter of frontier life is always waiting to be unearthed. Beans, hard biscuits, and dried fruit. According to insights from True West, pinto beans were the primary selection of trail cooks. However, it is probable that they also incorporated other varieties, such as kidney beans and white beans. The advantage of utilizing lightweight dried beans resided in their portability and the ease with which they could be soaked throughout the day within the wagon. This facilitated straightforward preparation during the evenings once the crew had settled for the night. Moreover, dried beans boasted an extended shelf life and served as an excellent source of protein, rendering them an incredibly satiating meal for cowboys traversing the open range. Regrettably, a drawback existed. Beans generally had to be consumed immediately, given the absence of reliable refrigeration methods. Preventing them from souring after cooking was a persistent challenge. Despite the seemingly unremarkable nature of plain beans, the cook possessed several stratagems. It was common practice to cook beans alongside chili peppers, imparting both heat and depth of flavor. The University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture speculates that combining beans and rice with red chili allowed the meal to stretch further. This approach was essential, as catering to the appetites of up to 18 ravenous cowboys demanded the cook's utmost efficiency. Although the term hot rocks might evoke images of purloined gemstones, it actually refers to a specific classification of biscuit extraordinarily tough biscuit baked to absolute desiccation to eliminate every vestige of moisture. Bushcraft Buddy notes that these biscuits were crafted from merely 3 rudimentary ingredients: flour, water, and salt. The cowboy cook baked the biscuits multiple times until they achieved a stone-like hardness, hence the designation hot rocks. While the results remained edible for an extended duration, that does not signify they were palatable. These hard, brittle fragments of bread could be rendered more tolerable by moistening them with liquid such as water or milk. Recognized also as hardtack, this classification of bread was a staple for soldiers during the Civil War. Dried fruit was an absolute necessity for any properly equipped chuck wagon. It served to enliven the usual fare, offering a touch of sweetness amidst the more savory array of beans, meat, and bread. Much like many other sustenance items of the frontier era, the prevalent method of preserving fruit was to desiccate it. This process involved placing the fruit upon cheesecloth beneath the sun, permitting it to gradually shrink and harden. The cook frequently stewed dried fruit in the morning to enhance breakfast or presented it as a delightful dessert come evening. Pies were also fashioned from stewed fruit. To heighten the fruit's flavor, it was occasionally soaked in water and stewed with sugar. Meat formed a substantial portion of the cowboy diet. Cowboys consumed pork with regularity, often in the form of salt pork, sometimes designated sow belly, and bacon. As noted by the Tar Heel Jr. historian, pork remained a dietary staple from the earliest days of settlement up to the mid-1900s, as it was relatively straightforward to produce in substantial quantities. In an era devoid of refrigeration, meat that the cowboys consumed required preservation through some mechanism. Cowboys were perpetually in motion. Conventional refrigeration techniques proved entirely impractical. This is where salting enters the equation. The process of salting meat to desiccate and conserve it traces back centuries. The simplest form of salting meat involves arranging pieces of pork belly upon a layer of salt and then covering them with additional salt, permitting the meat to dehydrate across time. Another method of salting, referenced in Miss Beecher's domestic receipt book published in 1846, entailed layering salt and pork within a barrel until full, then submerging the entirety in pickle brine. Beef jerky assisted cowboys in sustaining their energy during prolonged cattle drives. They also relished various types of jerky fashioned from diverse meats. According to History Hit, smoked beef jerky was the most common method through which cowboys consumed beef. Its prevalence can be attributed to its prolonged shelf life compared to fresh beef, and it could be incorporated into stews. As the cowboy era flourished in the late 1800s across the American West, the tradition of jerky consumption extended far back in history, spanning hundreds of years. During those times, jerky was produced using a variety of techniques to cure, smoke, and dry the meat. The elements of sun, smoke, wind, and salt were all methods employed to create shelf-stable meat. Florida Raised reports that beef jerky is manufactured in nearly the identical manner today. Nevertheless, the cowboy version was drier, more brittle, and possessed a considerably more pronounced saltiness. Native Americans had also been fabricating pemmican bars, composed of dried meat such as venison or bison, nuts, and berries, for centuries. The cowboys appreciated them as well, as pemmican functioned as a sought-after trading commodity during encounters with indigenous communities, forging a connection between their culinary preferences. Coffee. The lifeblood of the cowboy, coffee was the very lifeblood of cowboys, a sentiment that holds true for many of us today. However, could we guzzle down the coffee they consumed? Probably not. The rigors of enduring labor-intensive days demanded a formidable cup, not the diluted, milk-laden, or cream-softened beverage we consume today. They required the invigorating potency of straight, black, scalding coffee. The cowboys' preferred brand? Arbuckles, of course. While Folgers may have reigned supreme for those participating in the California Gold Rush, Southwestern cowboys bestowed their preference upon Arbuckles. This preference stemmed from more than merely its flavor, however. Each Arbuckles package boasted coupons and, notably, a stick of peppermint candy. For hungry cowboys, this signified that the individual who ground the beans received the peppermint. That constituted a genuine treat in the Old West. The chuckwagon cooks extracted every conceivable droplet of caffeine and flavor from their coffee, piling fresh grounds atop the old ones before boiling away. If you find yourself wondering precisely how potent the cowhands preferred their Java, Western Words provides a recipe. Take 2 pounds of Arbuckles coffee, put in enough water to wet it down, boil it for 2 hours, then throw in a horseshoe. If the horseshoe sinks, she ain't ready. Sourdough, the cook's most invaluable companion. In addition to coffee and the trusty Dutch oven, a chuckwagon cook's most invaluable companion out on the range was his sourdough starter. While the cowboys congregated around the campfire each evening to spin their tall tales, Cookie found himself engrossed in the care of a sourdough starter. This was before active dry yeast was produced commercially by Fleischmann's in 1943. Prior to that milestone, sourdough bread was a staple, utilizing wild yeast to achieve its signature tangy flavor. The preferences of cowhands were clearly in favor of sourdough biscuits over their buttermilk and baking powder counterparts, a viewpoint corroborated by the cowboy professor from North Carolina State University. The attention-hungry sourdough starter is a mixture of flour and water that absorbs yeast and bacteria from its environment. The type of flour employed in your sourdough starter is critically important, as is employing clean jars with filtered water to prevent the growth of detrimental bacteria. Initiating the process involves a meticulous blending of all-purpose wheat flour and water on the initial day. The resulting mixture is then fed daily with a combination of starter, water, and additional flour. Neither Cookie nor you would need to feed the starter more than once a week, once you master the rhythm of feeding and storing it. Camp bread and fruit. What is a cowboy to do when he is hungry? And fabricating sourdough bread requires an impractically extended duration. He turns to a dependable solution, pan de campo, also recognized as camp bread or cowboy bread. Kent Rollins, a contemporary chuckwagon cook, boasting 2 decades of experience, offers wisdom on constructing the straightforward recipe with merely a few ingredients. Whether within the cozy confines of a kitchen or amidst the great outdoors with a Dutch oven, this method remains accessible. You will require all-purpose flour, salt, lard, oil, and milk or water to fashion the dough. Begin by sifting the flour and introducing the salt, providing a gentle stir. The lard is then blended into the flour using either a spoon or your hands, resulting in a crumbly texture. Following this, a well is formed within the flour amalgamation to accommodate the oil. Work it into the flour, then add the milk and knead until the dough is no longer adhesive. On the trail, water would serve as a suitable substitute for milk, a pragmatic choice for cowhands. Once the dough is rolled out into a thick circle, it takes its place within the Dutch oven, undergoing baking until achieving a desirable browning on both the upper and lower surfaces. Relatively simple, is it not? This ease of preparation likely constituted a pivotal reason behind its popularity among cowboys. Pecan and almond plantations yielded many nuts that were not deemed suitable for commercial export. Small, portable, and nutrient-dense, nuts were therefore popular. Apples were the most common fruit and constituted the majority of the dried fruit supply. However, apricots, cherries, peaches, and other fruits would also be available depending upon the region, and cowboys utilized them frequently. Mexican cuisine and rascal stew. Contrary to the portrayal in many old Western films, 20 to 25% of cowboys were black, indigenous, or of Hispanic background. In fact, according to history, Mexican men were the first cowboys, known as vaqueros, who were the pioneering cattle herders enlisted by Spanish ranchers. It is hardly surprising, then, to uncover that cowboys in South Texas embraced the tantalizing flavors of Tex-Mex cuisine during their cattle drives. To this day, San Antonio continues to host vaquero cook-offs, celebrating this heritage with esteemed recognition for the finest traditional Mexican dishes. Among the distinguishing features of this culinary heritage is pan de campo, a form of flatbread extolled by many. Alongside this, a feast of fajitas, carne guisada, beans, and chili are also savory dishes that cowboys of that era may have enjoyed. Seasoned Pioneers points out that chili con carne was a cowboy staple because the bowl of red stew was filling, especially gratifying after grueling days of cattle herding, and inexpensive to produce. Beef stew may be familiar, yet a true cowboy culinary experience is incomplete until one has savored the richness of rascal stew. Alternatively known as son of a gun stew, this is a combination of nearly every component of a calf except the animal's hide, hooves, and horns. Alongside tenderloin, this unique dish boasts an assembly of ingredients including the heart, liver, brains, marrow, gut, tongue, and sweetbreads. The liver, a key component, warrants cautious inclusion to prevent imparting bitterness to the stew. However, the spotlight invariably falls upon the marrow, gut, a conduit connecting the stomachs of young unweaned calves. This enigmatic organ imbues the stew with its distinctive and captivating flavor, defining its very identity. Whatever designation you prefer, this stew stands as a prime example of minimizing food waste. Cowboys cherished it, as it offered a refreshing deviation from their customary fare of beans and bread. Simultaneously, chuckwagon cooks took pride in their resourcefulness, conjuring a dish that was both delectable and economically mindful. Wild animals, Rocky Mountain oysters, and corn dodgers. The cowboy diet mirrored that of the pioneers in numerous respects. While they did possess the advantage of readily available beef, slaughtering your employer's cattle while moving the herd from one location to the next likely did not occur with any frequency. Instead, cowboys collaborated with the cook to secure sustenance, relying upon skills in hunting wild game and fishing en route. Maintaining favor with the cook became paramount for the hands, guaranteeing access to satisfying meals. Buffalo, deer, and elk would have provided a substantial quantity of meat for a hungry band of cowboys. Wildfowl also constituted a reliable source of protein, and certainly no one would have declined wild turkey or pheasant. Notably, the consumption of animals such as skunk, muskrat, and bear, though unconventional by contemporary standards, underscored the cowboys' adaptability in utilizing the varied resources available to them on the untamed frontier. During both the prime era of cowboys and the present day, ranchers engage in the practice of castrating young bulls in the spring, effectively transforming them into steers. This is necessary to protect the otherwise hot-tempered bulls from one another and to curb aggressive behavior toward their handlers. But one cannot simply discard all those testicles. To avoid wasting food, these residual parts were offered to ravenous cowhands and those possessing a taste for culinary curiosity. In the bygone days of the Old West, they were cooked over hot coals, forming a distinct culinary tradition. Corn dodgers were also a staple of the Old West. These have resonated with admirers of John Wayne and are exemplified in True Grit, where Rooster Cogburn employs them for target practice. The beauty of corn dodgers resides in their capacity to assume many different forms. Culinary ingenuity further manifests as certain cooks opt to carve their corn dodgers into squares. If this journey through the chuck wagon and the campfire stirred your appreciation for frontier ingenuity, please extend your support with a like and share. Do not forget to subscribe to this channel and leave your thoughts in the comments below so that you remain present for the next installment of Forgotten American History. Thank you for riding with us.